Hello, listeners. If you've enjoyed these narrations, please click on that like and subscribe button. I have always made bad choices in life. Bad choices when it comes to friends. Bad choices when it comes to cars. Bad choices when it comes to restaurants. I cannot count the times I have gotten food poisoning. You would think I would just learn my lesson and stop eating out. My latest series of bad choices landed me a job. I don't want to recall what got me here, but I'm a mailman now. My uniform arrived in the mail. It's a soft blue color that's dark and yet a light tone at once. It's pretty comfy, and they tossed in a nice bomber-style jacket. Having a job handed to you might be a nice thing. I should be thankful. But this job was dangerous, and I would die if I refused it. I was standing in front of an office building where I had been told my training would be held. A blank swipe card to get inside the building came with my uniform. I was pacing, putting off going inside. Even though the morning was chilly, I was still sweating. I did not want to go inside. I did not want to start this job, though I fear what would happen to me if I ditched it. Gathering all my courage, I swiped the card and went through the now unlocked door. Regret filled my chest when the door closed locked behind me. The room I was standing inside was pretty bare. Off-white walls and an off-white carpet. Fluorescent lights humming away above. The room was empty, aside from a woman sitting at a fold-out table. She didn't even look up to greet me. She just kept her eyes glued to a magazine she flipped through, looking very bored. I walked up to her, sweat still sticking my shirt to my back. She still didn't look at me. Instead, she sat chin in her hand, snapping at her gum. I started, then found I was suddenly impossible to speak. Her eyes darted up at me, and I took a step back in spite of myself. She looked like any pretty receptionist you could find anywhere, aside from her yellow eyes and mouth that was far too long for her face. Your partner's gonna be here in a few seconds. Do you got any smokes? She asked me, eyes still glued to her magazine. I shook my head and she lost any interest in me. I was hired as a mailman, but if I was a normal mailman, I would only have to worry about bad road conditions and maybe mean dogs. This was not at all a normal job. The mail I was going to be delivering was going to supernatural creatures. I know, it sounds like a silly idea, but I guess Bigfoot gets mail sometimes too. Who knew? Knock, knock. I raised my head to the voice and the knocking sound on the other side of the room. A door I hadn't noticed yet opened, and out peeked the head of who I thought would be a normal working partner. I kind of didn't like the type of person who would cheerfully say knock knock before opening a door. This guy might be too much for me to handle. He didn't notice my frown, and he smiled over to us. He was wearing the same uniform as me, but it fit much differently. He was at least 7 feet tall and built like a tank. He's covered the distance to us quickly, taking my hand in both of his in an excited shake. His kind, smiling face did not at all match the intimidating body of his. While he shook my hand, I could not take my eyes off the top of his head. I had to strain my neck to see, but my mind refused the possibility of it. This big, strong man had dog ears. Fluffy, sandy brown dog ears standing up on the top of his head. Scruffy hair covered when normal human ears should be. I finally tore my eyes away to notice another detail about him. The mental shock of seeing such cute ears on a tall, buff man made me not notice his legs. His uniform pants had been rolled up to the knees to accommodate dog-shaped legs. They were covered in the same sandy brown fur as his ears, His paws had claws that normally big and sharp enough to cut bricks in half. So not as cute as his ears. But his teeth also looked terribly sharp. His hands were human enough, but his nails ended in claws. He was being very careful not to nick me during our handshake. I knew my new coworker wasn't going to be human, but I wasn't expecting, well, this. "You're a dog?" I asked, not being able to stop myself. "What's a dog?" His smile never faded, and he looked so honest in his question, I almost laughed. The woman snapped her gum so loud, it made it both of us looked at her, then get down to business, or at least try to. My partner tried to say his name, but because he wasn't human, his name was not meant for humans to say. It sounded like a garble of growls, and after a few minutes of me trying to repeat it, we realized it just wasn't possible. "Rufus," the woman said, not looking at us. "Oh, right. My human name is Rufus. You're Toby, right? I'm glad to be working with you," Rufus said with a big smile. If his teeth weren't so sharp, that would be a nice expression. "His type is the only one of his kind that is all right working with humans. Here, you need to deliver this letter to Mr. Chatter." As she spoke, she took a red envelope from under her magazine for Rufus to take. The tall man thanked her and safely tucked the envelope away inside of his jacket. He was ready to go, but I wasn't. I was still a little confused about this whole thing. Rufus noticed my expression and smiled again, trying to look friendly. "We're going through the maze today." "The maze?" I asked slowly. To get ready for my odd job, I had just spent the last week reading up on cryptids, supernatural things, and really any other kind of information along those lines. I didn't believe in most of it, but with the dog man in front of me, I should really start reconsidering what I do and don't believe. In those hours of looking, I hadn't come across anything called the maze before. How should I describe it? It's, a lot of the same rooms. It has 2 floors, so to speak. The light floor that is just a bunch of rooms, and hallways in the dark 2nd floor. I think different versions of this place appears for different people. But we're going to an easy, safer version of it. We'll be sticking to the 1st floor. Because you're human, the maze may be tough on you. Your uniform protects you from most things. The monsters on the 1st floor won't attack you. Or really won't be able to see you, I should say. Mr. Chatter is on the 1st floor. He might look scary, but is a real friendly guy. Oh right, you're human, so he might not be. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is you shouldn't worry because we're mailmen. The whole "don't shoot the messenger" really does apply to us. I know Rufus was trying to be friendly and ease my worries about our new job and where we're going. And I had been pretty stressed about the whole thing from the small amount I had already heard. I didn't like it at all. I should be really worried about what fresh hell I was walking into. However, I got distracted. Rufus turned a little when he was speaking, and I caught a glimpse of it. He had a tail. I couldn't handle it. It was a curvy, fluffy thing that was so damn cute I wanted to scream. This man looked like he could eat a tank for breakfast, and he had the nerve to have a cute, fluffy tail. I could not deal with the juxtaposition of this tough appearance and cute tail. Pick one or the other. You can't have both. I hated it. He misread my expressions as still being worried. He slapped a large, comfortable hand on my shoulder and laughed. "You'll do fine. With my nose, we won't get lost. Just don't interact with any other humans you find lost inside. Your job is to deliver mail, not to save humans. We get in a lot of trouble if we go outside of our job duties." But you're doing great already. You already took one step inside of the maze, so what's a few more? I nearly jumped and looked around the empty room. It felt odd. Even so, I didn't think I had walked into a supernatural area. This is part of the maze? I asked, still looking around. We call them zero rooms. It's a neutral area for meetings. They can be controlled when to appear and who can be allowed inside. It's pretty neat. I didn't share Rufus's expression. I guess he was right. I had already taken a few steps into this world and had a big man to protect me. Human or not, I might be alright. I was feeling a bit better about this whole thing. I followed behind Rufus into the door on the other side of the room. Before we left, Rufus turned to address the woman behind us. Please pick up some eggs for dinner tonight, he called out to her. When I looked at him confused, he gave me a kind smile. She's my daughter. Third marriage. I did a triple take. Those two couldn't possibly be related. I didn't have time to ask about it. We were through the door and inside the so-called maze. All my fear came back and crashing down. The place looked very much like a bigger version of the room we had been inside just before. I turned to look behind us to see the door we came inside had disappeared. I guess there's no turning back now. The first few rooms I could see into had the same off-white wallpaper, but the floor was hard wooden. Someone dumped white paint over. It looked like the rooms just kept going. But a few rooms in, the poorly painted wood turned into carpet. I followed behind my new coworker, looking around, stained to hear anything. I thought creatures would be around, and I really didn't want to run into them, protected by my new uniform or not. I suddenly wondered what that meant. The fabric really didn't feel extra durable or thick. I didn't think it would save me if anything with claws decided to make me a meal. I decided to ask a little more about the job I had just been forced into. So, about these uniforms. Oh, Rufus looked over at me with a friendly smile. This guy really was like an excited dog. They're really special. I don't really understand the process of how they're made, but I heard each has some of the Silver King's hair in it. So it's like super tough. What's a good example for a human? Like a bulletproof vest. If you were shot, you wouldn't even feel it. It also keeps some lesser creatures that would do you harm from even being able to see you. That doesn't mean you're invisible, though. There are some creatures that could tear through the uniform, but it's your first day. You won't come across them. I hope. The last bit was said so softly, I almost didn't hear him. I had met the Silver King, and he was the reason why I was stuck within this damn job. But he was a big deal in the supernatural world. It was a bad idea to drop his name, and I don't really want to find out what would happen if I did. I sort of understand how the uniform worked now. Even with that comfortable idea of a god-level bulletproof vest, I was still scared walking around this horrible place we were in. As we walked, I saw that the walls had marked spots, messages from people who had gotten lost. They used whatever they could to write them. From what I guessed, it was nail polish, to scratch away at the wallpaper. I hadn't heard any signs of life beyond the carpet-muffled sounds of our own footsteps, and without any other noise to cover it, the oddly disconcerting hum of the lights above. Rufus clearly knew where he was going, even though everything looked the same. But as we kept walking, I started to see more messages and stains on the ground. I feared was dry blood. I didn't want to think about who or what left those stains. I stopped in front of one wall with frantic writing in a faded Sharpie. It was a name and an address. That was all. I don't know why it got me to stop. There were plenty of names written, and we passed by many odd pleas for help. I couldn't help but wonder about the people who had died here. or who was still lost, and their loved ones who was waiting for them to come home. I had my phone in my pocket, without realizing I had taken it out to take a photo of the message I was staring at. "It's best if you don't." I froze when I heard Rufus speak. There was suddenly tension between us. He was telling the truth. It's best if I don't let myself go down the route of trying to find what was lost. Nothing good could come of it. I turned off my phone and returned it to my pocket. I think he felt bad for making it awkward. He kept darting his eyes back at me, clearly trying to think of something to say. "You know, things have changed a lot since I last came by. Because this place adjusts to humans' expectations, it's never the same twice. Two people could be right next to each other, but seeing something different. The last time I was here, it smelled so much of chemicals and bleach, it was hard to get around. But now, it's pretty nice. I can understand why the creatures have been moving here recently. Lots of space. Free food." Rufus was trying to fill the silence by chatting away. When he mentioned the food part, he gestured to a stain on the floor we had just walked by. We had been walking by an increasing amount of them. The one he nodded his head towards looked fresher than the others. I looked up at him, face twisted in horror over what he was implying. I keep forgetting you're human. That was very insensitive of me. I'm sorry." We decided to walk in silence after that. I just wanted to find whatever Mr. Chatter was and get out of here. Even though we didn't see any bodies, it was becoming very clear people had died in this place. I hadn't heard or seen anything, and Rufus hadn't named a big bad monster to look out for. So what was killing all these people, taking their bodies and leaving their belongings behind? I walked around the copper-colored stains on the ground, but found it slowly getting harder to walk around them. I really didn't want us to get to the point where the floors were entirely that dried blood color. I soon found out I didn't have any choice. Because I had cut my phone off, I didn't have any idea how much time had passed. It felt like we were walking for at least an hour, getting deeper into the endless twists and turns. To my surprise, we came across a door. I had very much hoped we had arrived where we needed to deliver the envelope. It was not meant to be, though. We still had some walking ahead of us. Rufus stopped in front of the door and paused before opening it. He looked down at me, his expression deep in thought. "Do you know any songs?" It was such a weird question out of the blue. Still, I should have just gone along with what he said to keep me safe in these strange places. Maybe why? I looked around trying to see any changes. We were still alone, surrounded by traces of death. "This room might be a bit upsetting for people who have not adjusted to certain smells. I find singing distracts me enough to get through it. Well, doing two things at once is hard for me. Not sure about your kind, though." Rufus really seemed the type to not be good at multitasking. It was nice of him to take my newness to the job into consideration and warn me ahead of time. I didn't know if singing would help, and I honestly was embarrassed to sing in front of anyone. I still should trust him, and at least try. But damn my brain for not functioning in that moment. The only song I could think of was one from an old animated movie I watched to death in my childhood. I didn't remember the name of the movie, but for some reason my brain decided only to remember that song. It was a short one. I felt my face flush from the embarrassment. There was no way I was going to sing in this situation. I had thought Rufus was a dumb, yet nice guy. Still, with a method unknown to myself, he not only convinced me to sing, but we went through the short song twice. I was surprised he was smart enough to remember the lyrics after hearing it only once. It made me feel a little prepared for whatever was behind that door. Rufus didn't even pause in his singing while he opened the door, and the smell hit us. My stomach fluttered as I started to feel queasy, but oddly enough, the singing actually helped. I took one step into the room, and all my willpower drained from me completely. The room was small. It only took me 10 steps to get to the other side, to the door. But those few steps were too much for me. The entire room had been soaked with blood. I could almost handle the rotten smell, but the added sense of the sight made my entire body freeze. Because the room was the same color, I hadn't noticed the shape vaguely resembling a person at first. It was a mass of gore, and as I squinted, I could make out human features like limbs and a head. I didn't want to squint. I didn't want to look. I squeezed my eyes shut and took one step forward. Rufus was still singing on the other side, so I followed his voice. I would be fine. The mass of gore was in the corner. I wouldn't trip on it if I just walked straight and towards my coworker. I tried to join into the song, but only managed a few weak words. So far, I hadn't been in any actual danger. I hadn't seen any creatures, aside from Rufus. He did his best to comfort me and tell me how even if something did attack me, I would be safe. Even knowing all that, I couldn't handle that room. Every step I took made my skin crawl and stomach turn. The blood stuck to my shoes, and when I stepped down, my foot slid a little on the soaking wet floor. My hands started to shake, and I shoved them in my pockets, trying to hide how scared I was. "Hey, let's go. Hey, let's go," I muttered to myself, the part of the song. Between my voice and Rufus, I heard another, a small whisper coming behind me. So small, I didn't think I had heard anything at first. "Help." The thing in the corner couldn't be alive. Nothing could be alive in that room. I was stressed out and hearing things. I raised my voice trying to drown it out, but it trembled. "I'm happy as can be. Help." From how close Rufus sounded, I knew I was only a step or two from out of this nightmarish room. I froze again when I felt something brush against my ankle. Slowly, fingers wrapped around just where my pant leg stopped. The grip was weak. Every nerve in my body was set on edge as I felt something wet soak through my sock from where the hand grabbed me. I heard that plea for help once more. With a burst of strength, I shot out of the room, kicking off whatever had taken a hold of me. I heard Rufus close the door. I collapsed against the wall, shaking violently, and tears threatened to fall. I curled up, head on my knees, trying to calm myself down. So what if my uniform was magic and could protect me from bullets? I wasn't being protected from any mental trauma from this place. Rufus was nice enough not to say anything to me as I collected myself. I bet he would have given me as much time as needed. However, we were on a time limit I wasn't aware of. The red envelopes are time sensitive. If we don't deliver them fast enough, they explode. Your uniform would protect you, but it might destroy the room we're in and cause you to be lost somewhere between rooms, so, it's best if we get going. I swear, we're really close. Only 2 more rooms. Staring at my now bloodied sneakers, it took everything I had to stand back up. Only 2 more rooms. I had to do this to get the hell out of here. To my surprise, I found our surroundings back to being normal. Well, as normal as this place gets. The walls had gone back to the bare off-white without writing or stains. If it stays like this, I think I can handle 2 more rooms. True to his word, we passed through 2 more hallways and into the last room. It looked almost the same to me. I was glad to have had him as my guide, in that moment wondering why I even was with him. I mean, Rufus clearly could have done this on his own. Maybe this was my shadowing training day. Some places did make you just watch someone for the first few days. It was the only thing I could think of. "Mr. Chatter should be beyond this door. Just knock and he'll show up," Rufus told me when he entered the last room. It was a dead end, and the first dead end I had seen in this place. On one wall had a drawn outline of a door, but no real way out. Even though we were so close to the end, anything Rufus was saying had been lost to me, because I had seen her. A little girl no older than maybe 10, fractally struggling to free her leg that had phased through the floor. She was dirty and looked like she had been stuck here for a long time. The poor thing looked scared to death. She was struggling so hard and bending her leg in a way that looked painful. It gave a little bit of give. I thought if she had a little bit more strength, she could pull herself free. Rufus saw me looking at her, and he smiled. She's stuck between floors. She's actually on floor 2, but with her legs stuck here, it looks like she's on this floor. It's pretty neat, huh? This place works in such weird ways. Anyway, I didn't let him finish. I just couldn't leave her. I ran forward and wrapped my arms around her to try and pull her free. The moment I took a hold of her, my surroundings changed. I was no longer in the dull yet safe area, but inside a place so dark I could only see because of a lit road flare burning away a few feet away from us. The poor girl was screaming, trying to get me off of her. I don't know why, but the moment I took a hold of her, it transported me to a different floor, one much darker and dangerous. I'm trying to help, it's alright, just let me help you, I told her frantically, trying to calm her down. I really don't blame her for freaking out because someone had suddenly grabbed her. With my help, I got some of her leg free, but I wasn't fast enough. I felt something hit my back hard. I didn't want to look behind me to see what was clawing at my back. Rufus was right. The uniforms did work. The thing was a mass of dark fur and teeth. It snagged the fabric, but it could not cut it getting to my tender flesh. I saw hundreds of eyes glittering in the darkness, looking at us. A rumbling growl came and I nearly gave up on everything right then and there. I felt a sudden flash of pain on my cheek. The creature on my back had cut me in the struggle of trying to get onto my back. In that moment, I realized a fault in the uniform. It only protected what it covered. My head was fair game to any creatures coming out. I had to get both of us out of here now, fast. The girl had stopped struggling, and now it was only me trying to free her. I felt a strong grip on my arm and I screamed. Rufus suddenly appeared. He tore the creature from my back, tossing it into the darkness with one hand. Let go of her. If you keep touching her, you'll stay on this floor. You'll die in a few minutes. His voice was stern, but full of worry. I knew I was making a mistake, but I just shook my head. I couldn't just leave a little girl behind. Dark shapes swooped in. I saw light shining off their teeth as they tried to attack us. Rufus was able to swat them away, but his hands were getting cut from the sharp claws. He easily could have pulled me from the girl. Instead of forcing me, though, he wanted me to make the right choice. He was such a kind person, trying to talk me down from a mistake. You need to let go of her. She's already dead. And that couldn't be true. She had been moving a few seconds before. If I could get her free, if I could just pull her free, we could get her out of there. My eyes became unfocused and filled with tears. I could only see the girl's limp arms dangling and a sparkling bracelet reflecting off the road flare. A sound made me jerk my head up. A grunting roar cut through the darkness. Rufus reacted to it by kicking his leg into the dark while holding out my arm. I couldn't see with his leg contacting it. I only heard a horrible crunch ripping sound as I watched in horror as his leg kept moving, now missing everything below the knee. He had his pants legs rolled up so his uniform didn't protect him from whatever cut it off. I knew then that I had to let the girl go, or else we would both die. I let go of her and I grabbed on to him, and a second later, I felt the sensation of falling. My entire body felt like I was being tossed around, even though we were standing still. A sudden crushing force made me collapse to my knees, feeling like I had just been in a car crash. I couldn't move for a few minutes, but when I opened my eyes, I saw we were back in the dead-end room. The girl was gone, her bracelet left behind on the floor behind me. Rufus was in bad shape. A pool of blood started to pool around where his leg had been cut off. His eyes were closed, and I feared he was dead. And this was all my fault. I should have just listened to him. My job was to deliver the mail, nothing else. If we finished the job and got out of here, I was certain I would be killed for my poor performance. I only took this damn job because my only other options were thinning veiled threats of death. Rufus opened his eyes, looking too weak to even sit up. I sat, waiting for him to yell at me, to blame me for everything. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Rufus. I found myself unable to speak through the lump forming in my throat. It's all right. You are only human after all. He was smiling at me. I would have much rathered him be angry. His kindness cut like a knife in that moment. He reached inside of his jacket pocket to bring out the envelope we were still meant to deliver. All this trouble for such a small thing. All I had to do was take it, knock on the drawn-on door. I felt too weak, and so close to tears I nearly couldn't stand. His kind smile encouraged me enough to take it from him and walk over and knock on the wall. I took a few steps back after I did, terrified over what would happen. After I knocked on the fake door, it turned into a real one. It swung open on its own, a pitch-black room beyond. I clutched the envelope in front of me, staring into the darkness, waiting. As seconds slowly crept past, I started to hear a faint sound, a chattering, clicking noise that seemed like it was getting closer. I took another step back. Suddenly, the entire door was filled by a massive face slamming against it so hard, it cracked the frames around it. I tripped over my own feet, screaming, and falling hard on my own ass. Somehow, I kept the envelope in my hand. My throat closed because I was so scared. I couldn't make another noise. I couldn't move. I only sat with that thing in front of me. It was a human-looking face, so large it took up the entire door. The chattering sound was coming from its mouth opening and snapping shut at a frightening speed. For a moment I almost started to chatter my own teeth together with it. It kept pressing, trying to fit its face through, trying to get to me. Teeth noisily coming towards me inch by inch. I don't know where I got the courage from, but I stood up, legs shaking. Slowly, I took a few careful steps closer. The noise was rattling down to my bones. I held the envelope out as far away from my body as I could muster. I closed my eyes, unable to handle seeing such a creature. Both of us inched closer to each other, until finally its massive set of teeth closed around the corner of the envelope and stopped. The silence made me open my eyes. The creature known as Mr. Chatter had finally stopped snapping its mouth. Slowly, the red envelope started to burn away. When it was nothing but ash on the ground, the creature opened its mouth again, but this time to give out a bellowing, awful laugh. And for a lack of a better way of putting it, the entire head collapsed in on itself. The mass sucked into a pinpoint into space so quickly that a blink of an eye it was gone. The door slammed shut, disappearing so it was just a plain wall again. I had finished the job, even if I had no idea what the hell just happened. A small click made me jump. With relief, I saw another door had appeared. This one was in the place to swing my black card I had received. I knew this was an opening to the zero room and the way out. The problem was dragging Rufus with me. I couldn't support his weight, and he couldn't walk. I turned to look where I had left him, only to see something else in his place. A dog stood on 3 legs looking at me. He wore the same jacket Rufus had on, and 2 light spots of his fur looked very similar to what Rufus' eyebrows looked like. He was that Shiba Inu breed everyone online loved. Well, I guess that solved the problem. I knew it could walk out on 3 legs, but I picked up the dog and pressed my face into his soft fur, tears threatening to overtake me. "I'm sorry," I told him again, truly meaning it. I only got a bark as a reply. The 0 room looked exactly like the other one. The receptionist did a double take of us. She got up and took Rufus from me, looking him over. "I won a bet with my siblings. Looks like I've won the bet with my siblings. They all thought she would have been dead. Good job finishing the job." I was a little shaken that she wasn't angry at me either. I had nearly gotten her father killed after all. "Was the other girl your twin?" It was her turn to look surprised. She was dressed in the same clothing as the first girl we met, but there was a kinder air about her. I don't know how I knew, but I was certain this girl was different from the other one I met. "Something like that. Anyways, you're done for the day. We'll send you a message when another job comes in. Now get out." She jabbed a thumb over her shoulder towards the door. The sharp gesture felt like it was jabbed into my chest. I scurried out, Rufus giving a small bark as goodbye. I had never been so thankful being done with a day of work in my life. It felt like hours had passed and I was exhausted. I blinked in the morning light and tightened my jacket against the cold air. I had come out of the building different from the one I had arrived in earlier. This one was a couple minutes walk from my place. I took my phone out to check what day it was, only to my confusion, saw I had only been gone for 2 minutes. Everything that had happened only took 2 minutes, real world time. I'm not proud to admit it, but when I got home, I cried harder than I had ever done in my entire life. I don't think I'm the only one who has cried like that after their first day of work. I truly dread when I'll get another message for a new job. Even so, I made up my mind to take it. I owe it to my first partner. He gave up his leg for me to survive. To pay him back for it, I had to deliver mail. An odd situation being in. I really only had myself to blame for it though.